I'm Dan, and this is 10,000 Hours of Indie, a podcast exploring new music and delving deeper into what goes on in the background of the independent music industry. I've been a musician and passionate music lover for as long as I can remember, and spent a stupid amount of time listening to mostly new music every week. Get involved and help grow this community. Follow on socials, Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, and soon a YouTube channel too, and email me 10,000indie@gmail.com if you have any ideas or want to get involved in the podcast itself. I'd love to hear from you. Hub New Music are a four-piece modern classical chamber ensemble from Detroit, comprising Michael Avitabile on flute, Gleb Kanasevich on clarinets, Magnolia Rora violin and viola, and Jesse Christensen on cello. They have been commissioning new work since 2013 to suit their unique lineup. Today, June the 27th, sees the release of What If We're Beautiful, a 5-movement celebration of queer joy written by Daniel Thomas Davis. I'm chatting with Michael from the quartet about the new release. Hello, Michael. Welcome to the 10,000 Hours of Indie podcast. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. It's a great album. You've just got back from a tour as well, so how did that go?
Great. We were in Orlando and then we were in Connecticut right after for back-to-back festivals. We were doing a lot of teaching. So during the summer, we'll often go to a handful of summer festivals where composition fellows are writing for us. And I think over the course of, this might be a record for us actually, over the course of 4 days, I think we learned and performed like 14 student compositions, some of which we got like several days before the concert. So,
wow. Okay.
When we got on the plane home, I think we really felt the weight of the 2 weeks of work. And I went home. I got back to my apartment here in Detroit, and I think I slept for about like 24 straight hours. Truth be told, I forgot we had an album coming out until like today because we were just so knee deep in the tour and the concerts and the teaching. That I got home and I'm like, oh, I'm doing an interview today because I guess we have an album that we worked on for years coming out on Friday. So that's cool. I should probably remember what's on the record.
It's all right. There's no specific questions about the music, so don't worry too much.
Oh, phew. Okay, good.
Did you play any of the new songs while you were on this tour?
We did not. We were playing other reps. So there were guest composers, like composition faculty at the 2 festivals. And we were actually playing their music because we had also commissioned those composers. They were Angelica Negro and then Christopher Cerrone, who were on faculty, and we have done commissions with them. So they were already there. So we had the real treat of getting to play their music for them and having rehearsals. But we are playing Dan Thomas Davis's piece at Bowdoin. We'll be at the Bowdoin Chamber Music Festival in 2 weeks, and we're playing it there as kind of a part of the release celebrations for the record.
Are you playing it in full?
Playing the whole thing.
Wow, I wish I could be there. Yeah,
it's being streamed on the Violin channel.
You'll have to give me the link so I can put it in the notes for the podcast.
Oh, I will.
So I saw on your website that you've also played in London and Tokyo. How do shows like that differ from playing in your homeland?
Well, for both times, they were tied to specific projects that we were doing. So the concert in Century Hall in Tokyo was actually part of a larger 2-week tour of Japan. And we were in Kyoto and Hiroshima, and we were all over in Japan. And that was attached to a project that we do with a shakuhachi player named Kojiro Umesaki and a composer collective called the Asia American Music Institute. And it was truly one of those most memorable 2 weeks of my life, getting to go to all of these historical sites. We played really everywhere, ranging from shrines and temples to museums to Suntory Hall, like the Carnegie of Tokyo, meeting all kinds of people. And one of the concerts was a benefit concert for a city that had this horrible flood the year before. And so there was just this incredible amount of cultural exchange and kind of diplomacy built into the whole thing, which now, given the climate, seems more important than ever doing that kind of work. Playing at home is wonderful, of course, because we get to go places we've never been to before. But I think to kind of immerse ourselves in another culture, to meet all kinds of people we never would have met before, and kind of have this artistic exchange and getting to know each other through the work we're presenting and being in the place and working with the concert series of the venue. There's really just nothing like that experience. And I look back specifically on that tour as something that I come back to, that as like, this is why I do what I do. It's just this ability of music and art to kind of create these connections where maybe other areas of life, politics, maybe lack.
I understand.
And then in London, I'd never been to London before, and I just thought it was the most beautifully charming place, and I can't wait to go back. We were at King's Place for a festival hosted by the Riot Ensemble. The director, Aaron Holloway-Nahum, is a friend and wrote us this really brilliant piece that we premiered at the festival. That one, comically, is really memorable because we had COVID and we got stuck in London for 2 weeks because it was at a time when you had to test negative to get back into the United States. Oh my God, it was the funniest thing. I can't believe I'm saying this on a podcast. We couldn't afford to stay in London for the full 2 weeks. So we found an Airbnb in Brighton, just, like an hour or so south. Yeah. And the Airbnb was really inexpensive because it wasn't like tourist season yet, because it was like late April. So no one was really like going there to go to the beach. And I'm messaging with the Airbnb host, and he's like, so what brings you 3 Americans to my Airbnb in Brighton in such a peculiar time of the year? And we're like, oh, just being friends. Just 3 friends traveling abroad, definitely not using your apartment as like a sick house. Who would do such a horrible thing? But as a result, I stayed in Brighton for 10 days, and now I have this lovely attachment to Brighton. Once we were well enough to like leave the apartment and we weren't quarantining anymore, I just remember walking through the streets to this particular coffee place and going to the beach and seeing like the iconic carousel. And I have such a fondness of Brighton now, and I'm not a sports fan by any means, but Brighton is my team now, just because of that.
It's nice that COVID wasn't a negative for everyone.
I mean, it was scary, I'm not going to lie. And I had not gotten it, because this was April of 2022, I think, and I had not gotten it since like ground zero, case zero, right? And I was really proud of myself, and I was like, I dodged the plague, and then I get it.
Big sticker saying, yeah,
worst time imaginable. And I was like, I couldn't have just gotten it like over Christmas like everybody else. So I had to get it while traveling abroad, and then figuring out, okay, well, how do I get back to America?
It's an interesting collection of instruments you've put together. Whose idea was Hub New Music, and how did it begin?
It's my fault. I will own up to that. Hub actually started as a more kind of free-flowing collective of friends who wanted to play new music when I was in grad school at the New England Conservatory in Boston. And we were just putting on concerts in like art galleries and churches and basically any venue around Boston that would let a bunch of like grad students come in and not have to like rent the venue because we had no budget to speak of. And, we were bringing like chairs and music stands from our living rooms and plopping it all there and, putting like very DIY. And it was a lovely experience. But in the process of putting these concerts together, we didn't have like a piano or percussion equipment or like a PA system to do anything kind of with electronics or anything like particularly like spectacular. And in putting together and programming these concerts, I was just on the Google, as you do in 2013, just sitting there looking up pieces like composers I remembered from playing their music in band when I was in college, or looking up other contemporary music ensembles, just trying to, because I knew hardly anything about this world. And in the process of this research, stumbled on this little collection of repertoire for flute, clarinet, violin, and cello that was commissioned by a group in Seattle called the Seattle Chamber Players, who I unfortunately don't believe are active anymore. But there was this great little body of repertoire. And so for a non-standard instrumentation, we were actually quite fortunate that we didn't have to commission everything we played from the get-go. And so we kind of had like a standard repertoire from like, yesteryear of 2008. And we treated that like it was our Beethoven quartet or like it was our Nielsen Woodwind quintet, insert, standard repertoire here. And we learned it really, really well. And we played all these pieces and we said, this ensemble combination, I think there's something here. It's so colorful. It's like a miniature orchestra. Doublings and the winds add so much to the instrumentation. And we decided to run with it. Now, about 12 years later, we commission everything we play. And so we have a handful of commission projects coming every season. We did a big 10th anniversary commissioning project that we wrapped up a year and a half ago that gave us so much really incredible repertoire. And now we're looking forward out commissioning stuff for the next several seasons, a lot of multimedia, a lot of kind of larger scale pieces that we're working on these days. But it all started just by like self-presented DIY concerts in an art gallery in South Boston.
That's the way all music should start, really, isn't it?
I think so. And that gallery space, I should go back there at some point. My parents live in Boston now. I should go back and visit just for the wave of nostalgia. But yeah, it just started with the desire to do something that wasn't really happening within the scope of our school curriculum. It's at NEC, and there was new music, but there was just so much going on at NEC. It was hard to like get a hall or a venue, and this very specific thing we wanted to do wasn't being offered to us at school. So we just said, well, let's do it ourselves outside of the conservatory.
Because it's no longer just about the quartet, is it? Now it's a whole musical landscape, which includes education and coaching and everything like that as well. Can you how did that come about from how it started?
We're a fully fledged, 501c3 nonprofit organization, which we're really proud of. And so we knew early on that touring was something that we wanted to do. And I think the model for that came from like more senior ensembles, say like Ace Blackbird or So Percussion, where the university residency is kind of the bread and butter for a lot of touring here for chamber music ensembles, especially in the new music world in the States. And so with that comes the need to do a lot of composition workshops with student composers. We do a handful of career talks when we're there, of like how we self-manage and how we run the organization, how we commission new pieces of music. And of course, master classes for performers, whether it's chamber music coaching or studio master classes. And so that kind of becomes a really integral part of what we do. And what I love about that work is that we're really just kind of translating what we do in the performance and kind of administrative sphere of Hub. And we just kind of translate that into a talk or a lecture or a workshop that we give for the students. So what we do kind of outside of the educational realm is kind of like directly mapped onto that. So it's just, this is what I did today at my desk, or this is how I'm practicing this piece, or this is the process of this new work we've commissioned. And we kind of just offer that in like a little bite-sized package for a student.
And I guess it's really nice for the students that there's somebody who's actually out there doing it, talking about it, rather than sitting in a lecture hall being taught by people who maybe never managed to do that and are just educators.
Yeah, I think there's a certain practicality of what we teach. I mean, we're not professors. We make that really clear when we go in. One of us has a doctorate, but none of us hold like full-time academic positions. But we do know how to do what we do. Like, we know how to run our organization, this very like specific thing that we do, which actually the challenge of going and I think giving like especially the career development talks is how do we make our process and what we do and what we know more broadly accessible? Because I mean, I can tell someone how to like commission a new piece of chamber music and book a tour, but I can't go into a lecture assuming that everybody wants to have the same kind of career that I do, nor do I consider what we do to be some kind of benchmark of success that students should strive for. It's my job, it's what I do. So I think the challenge that we have, especially when we're talking to students about what it's like in the professional world, especially now that it's just changing so rapidly all the time, is how do I take, my work life, the portfolio of what I do as a flute player and as an administrator, and how do I find particular skills that are more broadly applicable to anybody who is in a music program?
How is the reaction to what you do musically? Because I imagine you're trying to, or from what I can hear of your music, you're trying to get classical music out to a new generation who may be a little skeptical when you're competing with sort of modern pop music and things like that.
Oh, gosh. We recently had a concert in Pennsylvania where we were playing something a bit more experimental, piece that we really love and believe in. And this audience member barged into our dressing room. I think not but 2 minutes before she barged in, I was not wearing pants because I was changing out of my concert clothes. And she comes in and she corners us and she's like, "Why did you play such ugly music?" it's not the reaction we normally get, thankfully. Funny anecdotes about people invading our personal space after a concert aside. What I love about the work that we do and about our field of the world of, contemporary classical music, as paradoxical as that term even sounds, there's this kind of voraciousness, especially with regard to different musical influences and styles that kind of make their way into what we do. Especially in the world of incorporating like experimental pop music into what we do. Right now, a real centerpiece of our project offerings for the coming seasons is this piece called Mirage by a composer, friend, colleague, just all around wonderful person named Daniel Bull. And one of the many reasons I love Daniel's music is that he just has this language that's his own of living in the film world and working with more experimental pop artists, and also being kind of a capital C classical music composer, and just kind of taking all of these experiences and influences and weaving them into electroacoustic pieces, meaning hub plus kind of an electronic element, and creating the sound world that you just like don't know what's coming from where. We workshopped the piece a couple of months ago. I get up and play the flute, and from the video, it looks like these electronic sounds are like coming out of the flute. And it has this certain kind of like more, again, experimental pop aesthetic to it, but it's for instruments that are, in very firmly in kind of like the Western classical tradition. And the piece is about UFOs. And so it has this little bit of like sci-fi fun element to it. And I think being able to offer projects like that to presenters and by extension our audiences kind of shows that the field is maybe not as cloistered as it may have appeared in the past. And there's this curiosity and this kind of bending and reshaping of what we think of as like genres that really excites me. And also the project that I mentioned earlier that we brought to Japan with Kojiro. Kojiro is a shakuhachi player, founding member of the Silk Road Ensemble. And so here we are performing, our 4 Western classical music instruments with a traditional Japanese flute, and kind of creating that cross-cultural dialogue there. And so how do we mix non-Western musical practices and engage with that in a curious and respectful way to create something that maybe is outside of what is perceived as, like, again, classical or capital C classical music. And I think it's really exciting. I think it keeps us nimble. It keeps us always learning. I never feel that I'm stuck in the music we're playing. We're very fortunate to be that way, because I know it's not the same case for everyone else who works in the classical music space.
Well, you've ruined my next question.
Darn.
I was going to say, before we spoke earlier today, I was listening to your last album, A Distance Intertwined, which was the collaboration with Kojiro Umezaki.
Yes.
Umezaki.
Yeah.
And I was just going to sort of push you down the aisle of explaining the constant strive to push musical boundaries and crossovers, but you've done it now, so I don't really need to ask that question. But no, I think that's probably what drew me to the album. Is it's not traditional classical. As much as I love classical music, don't get me wrong, I like the Mad Russians who were pushing the boundaries. I like things that you're not expecting when you listen. It has to have a twist somewhere in it. Even with rock music and things, I need something that isn't expected in there for me to really be passionate about it. And I think that's what I found with this album. More of a statement than a question, I guess.
Thank you.
From what I can see, the lineup is the 4 of you, who I mentioned at the beginning, and then others come and go depending on the project. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So with this latest project, it is just the 4 of you, I think.
It is the 4 of us. The piece Water for Beautiful by Dan Thomas Davis is this. It's about a 20-minute piece. It's in 5 movements. And it, as you mentioned, is this celebration of queer joy and chosen family, which we've been touring this piece for a little over 2 years now. And the album has been in production for over a year. But it feels especially powerful to be releasing that now. Anyone who's listening, United States political landscape is a little weird right now. It's not our favorite. It's tense. Tense is a good word. That's a very good word for it. And to be able to kind of share something that is just overtly about queer joy and not about pain or sorrow or, it's not tragic in any way, I think is also very powerful to make our voice heard from a place of joy and celebration and not one of despair. And so each of the piece's 5 movements has the initials of it's a musical gift to one of Dan's chosen family. And so the piece is structured as this series of 5 musical gifts. The last track on the record is a bonus track in which Dan recorded one of the movements on the hurdy-gurdy, which I think he describes as this like platypus of an instrument that has, this its own resonating chamber and a keyboard and gut strings, and it's just, it's a queer instrument. And it's my favorite track on the record.
I think it's mine as well. It's a great track. Yeah.
The rest of it, I mean, whatever, I play it. It's fine. It's good. I'm happy with it. I'm proud of it. But like, I love the last track.
But for anyone listening, they should work their way through it and get to that at the end.
Yes. It doesn't hit the same way if you don't listen to the whole record. I think we did intentionally put it at the end, position it as this kind of like little beautiful cherry on top of the whole big gay ice cream sundae that is the album.
That's a beautiful way to. It's just such an optimistic and upbeat album. I think I've listened to it about 5 or 6 times already. Even for people who probably aren't into, a lot of the people who listen to this probably aren't into classical music or haven't discovered a route into classical music. And I think this could be quite a good gateway drug.
I hope so. I mean, like you said, it's optimistic and it's warm and a bit folksy, and I think that there's something in there that feels quite universal about the piece. Even if you were to not know the context of specifically what it's about, I do think there is this underlying sense of joy and, again, optimism there, and this warmth that just gives you a hug. And it's something I'm really happy is part of our discography, and I'm really proud to be releasing it.
This is going to be your 6th album release.
6th. Yeah, you probably know better than I do.
I've been scouring the website, trust me. And every album has a uniqueness to it. You have not done 2 things that are the same, and I really envy that because you've developed and you've taken different directions, and that's what keeps me interested in music, is people who think outside the box each time and try something new.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the wonderful thing about the records and the discography, which is just something we're all so proud of. And I think we love this idea of like legacy of, here's what we were contributing to the world. And each album, I think, is tied to like either a very specific piece. We're a big fan of like the single piece album because we commission such kind of larger works and they make a statement as a single piece on a record. Or in the case of the album with Co, it's 5 pieces, but they're all kind of under the umbrella of the same project. And I love that the records are really just tied to a very particular collaboration that we're doing. And all of those have just made up kind of the DNA of Hub New Music. And the ones we have coming in the future albums are the same thing. If they're just tied to like projects that are so important to us that we've toured for a number of years. And the record just feels like we're putting a bow on the whole creative process. Not to say that we don't tour something after we record it and release it, but there's like a certain kind of life cycle to things where like, for the year or 2 that we're rehearsing and learning and performing a piece, it kind of has this moment of culmination when we sit down and record it and then release it and say, this is what we've done. This is our work and our contribution to our field.
So as much as I love classical music, I'm from a rock background. So this might be a very naive question, but when you have a collaboration, does a composer come to you with a completely written piece after you've commissioned them, or do you sort of work together to make it what it is?
It really depends on, and our answer is not going to be the same for everyone in our field. We, I think, really thrive in that workshopping, exchange of ideas area. And so often how it works is that we'll go to a composer who we're interested in and say, hi, we're Hub, probably a friend connected us or a colleague connected us. And we say, we'd love to work with you on a piece. And then we kind of develop this idea together of like, okay, well, what inspires you? Is there anything that has been kind of like percolating that you want to create a piece about? Or maybe there's a particular funding source or kind of an external element that would help, bring the piece to life that we engage with. We've worked with a handful of like museums in the past on works that are, say, inspired by the collection of the museum. And we kind of have this initial dialogue of like, what is it we're going to create? What's it about? How long is it going to be? When are we going to play it? And then the kind of money contract thing happens. And then the composer goes off into their little laboratory. And then somewhere along that timeline of when they're writing it, we do a workshop or maybe a couple of workshops where they send us drafts. We'll either do that in person if we're able to, or we kind of record it and send it back to them. We kind of have this game of like telephone going between the two of us. And what I love about that is that it feels not just like a piece for like flute, clarinet, violoncello, but it feels like a piece for us. And we have this ability to kind of put some kind of minimal creative input. The piece belongs to the composer, but to have this kind of like feedback of saying, oh, what if we tried this? Or what if we did this? Or I could actually do this on a different instrument and I think it might sound better. Or like, what were you intending with this passage and how can we like, rework it so maybe the success rate is a little higher when we're on tour. And that kind of creative back and forth is just so electric. That's why I keep coming back to this process, because there's just really, for me, and I think for all of us, there's nothing quite like that level of like artistic gratification that comes from really creating something together and having a sense of ownership over it and then sharing it with the world. I think it's so special.
It certainly comes through in the music. There's a unique input I can hear from the musicians in this, because I know I'm going back to sort of traditional classical music when I say this, but going to see an orchestra and see the same piece over and over, there's only so many things you can do with it. But if you've had some input into the process, it just flows better. It has more passion to it, I think.
Yeah. Well, and there's also this, I love a Brahms symphony as much as, the next classical music nerd. I think all of us, our gateway into playing our instruments was probably a piece of traditional classical music. And so I really do think of what we do as kind of an extension of that rather than like this entirely separate genre. But what I will say is that there is this kind of blessing and curse situation, is that we're not bogged down by performance practice in what we do. And so kind of with said Brahms symphony, there's just kind of like how it goes. And there's room for like a subtle nuance, like, oh, we're going to hear this part a little more here, or, we're going to take the tempo, like, oh, maybe a smidge slower within kind of an acceptable range of tempos. But I do think it requires like a certain degree of expertise to pick up on those like very subtle differences of interpretation in the standard rep. But there's also this sense of knowing, again, how it goes. There's a performance practice. We've heard it. Whether we don't know a specific piece, we know how that music of that time period sounds. And there's just kind of like a true north there. With what we do, we get a score and we're like, what is this? And so it's very much like from scratch forming that interpretation, which creates its own set of challenges. We record ourselves in rehearsals all the time because we'll get a piece and we'll play it and we're like, we'll sit and play it and, maybe in that first reading be like holding on for dear life, but we have no idea how something sounds. we joke that we don't really know how it goes until maybe the third time we perform a piece. The premiere is like, very much like Jesus take the wheel. Like, I don't know how, like, I'll see you at the end. And there's a lot of excitement in that. And I think maybe that's where some of that like passion you're feeling comes from. It's a combination of excitement and terror coming from the stage. But I think we're not bogged down by something and we know the composer. And so we can say, what if the tempo is different here? Or what if this happens this way? And we're not kind of restrained by tradition in that way. So it's the Spider-Man great power, great responsibility thing. But I think with that, the newness of the thing comes the opportunity to kind of form that baseline interpretation of the piece that maybe, creates this foundation for maybe when other people would play the work in the future.
So obviously you're currently as of this interview, you're currently focused on promoting this new album. But this is one of many projects slated for 25-26, according to the website. Can you tell us what's coming up after this album?
Yes. So that piece with Daniel Wohl that I mentioned called Mirage, our big UFO piece that I'm just like so infatuated with, is happening this coming season. Am I allowed to say? I can say anything. It's like, this is not like the new Beyonce record. There's nothing top secret about what we do. We're touring pieces from our 10th anniversary. We have a piece by a composer named Nina C. Young that we recorded a while ago that we're editing, that we're, fingers crossed, we're hoping to release that this year. Another electroacoustic piece inspired by a collection of poetry called Permanent Volta by Rosie Stockton, which is beautiful. The piece is called To Hear the Things We Cannot See by Nina C. Young. So that's in post-production. We have a recording of a concerto that we tour with Wind Ensemble that we recorded just last month that I think is coming out in the fall. And that's the first time we've recorded anything like that. So I'm really excited to kind of see what comes of that whole recording session because it went super well and it was a lot of fun. The piece is called The Bird While by Gala Flagello.
So for anyone wishing to find out more about you and about Hub New Music, your website is hubnewmusic.org, which is filled with information on upcoming stuff and shows and things. And you're pretty active on Instagram too.
We are. I am personally not on social media, but my colleague Magnolia does such an exquisite job of all of that. So we have all the various socials. I don't think we're on X because we jumped ship from that one. But Instagram, Facebook, I actually think that that's a total lie. We're not. Those are the two that we're on. We all joke that we're just like old millennials who like are currently not accepting any new social media platforms in our lives. I like bake bread in my spare time, and I live a very like olden days kind of lifestyle. Despite the very like adventurous music I play for a living. So you will not find me on social media, but you can send me an email from the website and put me on your newsletter because I do read those. But Hub is on social media. And I saw our Instagram for the first time in 6 months on the airplane on Magnolia's iPad, and they're doing some good stuff on Instagram. I don't know what any of it means, but it looks cool.
No, the pictures look fascinating. It's good to have a way to connect with modern people besides me. For you and everybody listening, I have just joined Substack, so you can subscribe to my Substack newsletter.
Oh, I will. Okay, great. I love Substack. Substack.
So you can follow me on there, and everybody else can follow me on there, and you'll get a newsletter, and you won't have to touch social media.
See, that's what I'm talking about. That because you just like get to like you can actually like learn about somebody's like opinion or like. I think the essay is like one of the most incredibly beautiful mediums of communicating information. Sometimes because I'm truly like, I need more hobbies. I find myself instead of like writing a tweet or whatever the hell it's called about what we're doing, like I'll sit down and write like a 3-page essay about why this piece about aliens and the new Lady Gaga album are so important to me and why they're actually so connected for me personally. And like people Substack, I follow a lot of chefs and like food media, and I love hearing about people how they open restaurants and form menus. My dad was in the restaurant industry for a lot of my childhood, and food is like my first love. But like you don't get that from like a picture of like, here's me on the beach eating a hot dog and like, YOLOing or whatever the hell it's called. I don't know. I'm so old. I'm only 34, but I like have the mindset of like an 80-year-old woman. And I just find that like in these like in Substack and like newsletters and these like more like or like long form videos or podcasts, like what we're doing right now, it's like you actually get to like know the opinion and like get to engage with it beyond like being flooded with like 100 different, 100 character or fewer little blurbs that are like aimed at this rat race of becoming an influencer. I did not expect this to be like my diatribe about why social media is like the devil, but here we are.
Well, I'm definitely not cutting this bit out, I can tell you.
But hey, I have an album coming out on June 27th, which is when this airs, so you should listen to it.
Yes. I was just going to sum up with that. What If We're Beautiful is out today on Hub Music. Can be found on the usual streaming services.
Bandcamp, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you
actually, yes, check it out on Bandcamp, everybody, because that way you can buy it while you're listening to it, which is definitely the best way to get your music.
Thank you.
Michael, thanks for telling us more, and good luck with the release.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It was great to chat with you. Thanks.
Likewise.